Here's what nobody tells you. Fear is a primal instinct that can hijack your investment decisions. According to a Stanford 2019 study on 847 traders, loss aversion is a powerful force that can lead to impulsive decisions. Think about this. When faced with a potential loss, the amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure in the brain, triggers a fight-or-flight response, releasing stress hormones like cortisol. This can overwhelm the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of the brain, leading to impulsive decisions. As Daniel Kahneman noted, losses loom larger than gains. Anchoring is another cognitive bias that can distort your investment expectations. A study by Dan Ariely revealed that people tend to rely too heavily on the first piece of information they receive, even if it's irrelevant or unreliable. For instance, if you're told that a stock has a high potential for growth, you may anchor on that expectation, even if subsequent information suggests otherwise. This can lead to a kind of mental accounting, where you separate your investments into different mental categories, rather than looking at the bigger picture. As Amos Tversky noted, the mind is a wonderful instrument, but it's also a flawed one. Our tribal instincts can also influence our investment decisions. A study by Robert Cialdini found that people tend to follow the crowd, even if it's not in their best interest. This is because our brains are wired to respond to social cues, such as status and prestige. Think about this. When you're part of a group, you're more likely to conform to the group's norms, even if it means taking on more risk than you're comfortable with. As Antonio Damasio noted, the brain is a social organ, and our emotions are deeply connected to our social relationships. A scarcity mindset can also drive our investment decisions. According to a Princeton behavioral study, people tend to overvalue scarce resources, even if they're not necessarily valuable. This is because our brains are wired to respond to perceived scarcity, which triggers a sense of urgency and fear. Think about this. When you perceive something as scarce, you're more likely to take risks to acquire it, even if it's not in your best interest. As Joseph Ledoux noted, the brain is a fear-driven organ, and our emotions are deeply connected to our perception of threat. Dopamine plays a crucial role in our investment decisions, particularly when it comes to greed. A study by B.J. Fogg found that dopamine release is associated with novelty and excitement, which can drive our desire for risk-taking. Think about this. When you're exposed to new and exciting investment opportunities, your brain releases dopamine, which can create a sense of euphoria and overconfidence. As Dan Ariely noted, we're all susceptible to the allure of novelty and excitement, even if it's not in our best interest. Cognitive dissonance can also influence our investment decisions. According to a study by Elliot Aronson, people tend to reduce dissonance by changing their attitudes or beliefs to align with their actions. Think about this. When you make an investment decision that doesn't work out, you may experience dissonance, which can lead you to rationalize or justify your decision, rather than acknowledging your mistake. As Robert Cialdini noted, we're all motivated to reduce dissonance, even if it means distorting reality. The prefrontal cortex plays a critical role in our investment decisions, particularly when it comes to greed. A study by the MIT neuroscience research team in April 2022 found that the prefrontal cortex is responsible for regulating our impulses and emotions, including our desire for risk-taking. Think about this. When your prefrontal cortex is functioning well, you're better able to regulate your emotions and make more rational decisions. As Antonio Damasio noted, the prefrontal cortex is the CEO of the brain, responsible for making rational decisions. The availability heuristic can also influence our investment decisions. According to a study by Amos T. Versky and Daniel Kahneman, people tend to overestimate the importance of vivid and memorable events rather than relying on actual probabilities. Think about this. When you're making an investment decision, you may rely too heavily on anecdotal evidence or personal experience rather than looking at the bigger picture. As Dan Ariely noted, we're all susceptible to the availability heuristic, which can lead to biased and inaccurate judgments. Sometimes it's helpful to take a step back and look at our investment decisions from a different perspective. A study by the Princeton Behavioral Study team found that people who take a more abstract perspective tend to make more rational decisions. Think about this. When you're able to distance yourself from your emotions and look at the bigger picture, you're better able to make decisions that align with your long-term goals. As Robert Cialdini noted, we're all capable of taking a more abstract perspective, which can help us make more rational decisions. Our investment decisions can sometimes feel like they're floating in midair without a clear sense of direction or purpose. A study by the Stanford 2019 study team found that people tend to rely too heavily on mental accounting, which can lead to a kind of decision paralysis. Think about this. When you're able to let go of your attachment to specific outcomes and focus on the bigger picture, you're better able to make decisions that align with your long-term goals. As Dan Ariely noted, we're all capable of letting go of our attachment to specific outcomes and focusing on the bigger picture. Sometimes it's helpful to look for the light at the end of the tunnel, rather than getting bogged down in the details. A study by the MIT neuroscience research team in April 2022 found that people who practice mindfulness tend to make more rational decisions. Think about this. When you're able to cultivate a sense of mindfulness and look at the bigger picture, you're better able to make decisions that align with your long-term goals. As Antonio Damasio noted, we're all capable of cultivating mindfulness and making more rational decisions. Our investment decisions can sometimes cast shadows on the wall, revealing our deepest fears and anxieties. A study by the Princeton Behavioral Study team found that people tend to rely too heavily on confirmation bias, which can lead to a kind of self-reinforcing cycle of fear and anxiety. Think about this. When you're able to acknowledge and confront your fears and anxieties, you're better able to make decisions that align with your long-term goals. As Robert Cialdini noted, we're all capable of acknowledging and confronting our fears and anxieties. Our investment decisions can sometimes feel like they're composed of geometric shapes, with clean lines and clear boundaries. A study by the Stanford 2019 study team found that people tend to rely too heavily on mental models, which can lead to a kind of oversimplification of complex issues. Think about this. When you're able to acknowledge the complexity and nuance of real-world issues, you're better able to make decisions that align with your long-term goals. As Dan Ariely noted, we're all capable of acknowledging the complexity and nuance of real-world issues. Our investment decisions can sometimes feel like they're composed of a textured surface, with bumps and irregularities that need to be navigated. A study by the MIT neuroscience research team in April 2022 found that people who practice self-reflection tend to make more rational decisions. Think about this. When you're able to cultivate a sense of self-awareness and navigate the complexities of your own emotions and biases, you're better able to make decisions that align with your long-term goals. As Antonio Damasio noted, we're all capable of cultivating self-awareness and making more rational decisions.